The church doors groaned open on that crisp autumn day in 1898, letting in a blade of golden light that cut through the air and landed on her face. Abigail Hayes was 19, small-boned. Shaking so hard the wildflowers in her hand trembled like aspen leaves. Every pew was packed. The whole town had come to watch the scandal unfold. The richest man in Sagebrush, Colorado, was marrying the poorest girl. And nobody believed it was for love. Caleb Thorne stood at the altar like a mountain, carved from granite, their eyes the cold blue of high-altitude sky. They said he'd buried his heart the same day he buried his wife and baby boy 10 years earlier. Since then, he'd only bought sold in one land. Cattleman's pride, he took whatever he wanted and never looked sorry. Abigail's father had owed him $12,000, a fortune earned at faro tables and lost just as fast. When the lung fever finally took him, the debt fell to her. The bank wanted the little homestead by winter. Caleb paid the note the same afternoon, then rode up to the porch and made his offer. "Marry me and the house is yours. Your brother keeps his legs under your table, and no one ever touches you again." She had said yes because there was nothing else to say. Now the organ wheezed out Wagner, and every step down the aisle felt like walking to her own grave. She could feel the pity burning holes in her back. Poor little Abby Hayes sold for the price of a roof. She reached Caleb. His hand was warm, rough as pine bark, and it swallowed hers completely. The preacher's words floated past her like smoke. When he asked if she took this man, he cracked on the "I do" barely louder than a sob. Then it was Caleb's turn. He didn't hesitate. His "I do" rang clear against the rafters. Steady as a hammer on steel, the preacher smiled a thin smile of a man glad the awkward part was over. "You may now present the bride with her wedding gift." A murmur rippled through the church. Everyone knew Caleb Thorne didn't give gifts, he gave orders. Caleb reached inside his black coat and drew out a small bundle wrapped in faded blue calico, the exact color of the dress had worn the winter she was 9 years old. Her breath stopped. He placed it in her shaking Abby. She untied the knot with fingers that felt like wood. Inside lay a child's handkerchief, yellowed with age, embroidered in one corner with the crooked letters a H, and beneath it a single folded sheet of heavy paper. She unfolded it. It was the deed to the double bar, 6,000 acres of prime grassland, 300 windmills, 40,000 head of cattle, the big house on the hill, every horse, every brand, every dollar in her name alone. As legal as sunrise. Then in Caleb's careful, uneven handwriting across the bottom, "I was the half-dead boy you dragged out of the snow in '88. You gave me your coat, in the only kind words I'd heard in a year. You saved my life. I've spent every day since trying to become a man worthy of that kindness. Known is now yours. Keep it, sell it, burn it, I don't care. I only wanted you safe the way you once made me safe. If you never want to see me again after I'll ride away and you'll never hear my name again. But if you'll let me, I'd like to spend the rest of my days trying to deserve the mercy you showed a stranger." Caleb, the church was so quiet she could hear her own heartbeat. Abigail looked up at him. The hard lines of his face had cracked open. Eyes were wet and terrified, like a man waiting for a death sentence. Memory flooded her all at once. The freezing night, the bleeding boy behind the barn, snuck him cornbread and sung him the lullaby her mother used to sing, how he'd whispered, "Think you miss," with chattering teeth before passing out. She had never even known his name. Now the whole town knew. A sob tore out of her, half laugh, half cry, and she threw her arms around his neck right there in front of God and everybody. Caleb's arms closed, her like he'd been waiting a decade to do exactly that. Old Mrs. Delaney in the front pew started crying. Then Preacher Daniels, then the whole damn church was weeping, like someone had died and gone straight to heaven at the same time. Caleb pulled back just enough to look at her. "So what's your answer, Mrs. Thorne?" Abigail wiped her face with the sleeve of her wedding dress and laughed through the tears. "My answer is you're never getting rid of me, Caleb Thorne. Not after I spent 10 years wondering what happened to that boy." The organ burst into joyful music so loud the rafters shook. That afternoon, instead of the stiff receiving line everyone expected, Caleb stood on the church and shouted to the crowd that had followed them out into the sunshine. "The debt I hold in this county wiped clean today. Every widow's mortgage, farmer's note, every dime owed to the double-bar T gone. Call it a wedding present to my wife. Me what mercy looks like. Men took off their hats. Women hugged each other, children ran shouting through the street because their fathers were suddenly free. Years later, when people told the story, and they told it often, until it grew its own wings and flew to every corner of, they always ended the same way. One starving boy, one little girl with cold hands and a warm heart. One act of kindness nobody saw, and because of it an entire town learned how to be human again. Abigail and Caleb built a big stone house with wide porches, but they kept her father's little homestead too. It up and turned it into a home for children who had no one. Every Christmas they hung that old blue calico rag on the tree like it was made of gold, because to them it was. They grew old together watching sunsets from the same porch swing, head on his shoulder, his big hand wrapped around. And whenever a stranger, a hard man like Caleb Thorne, ever learned to be gentle, Abigail would smile and say the same thing every time. He didn't learn it, he just remembered it because somebody showed him when he was too broken to believe it still existed. One small light in the darkest night, sometimes that's all it takes to change the world. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to Western Tales of Frontier, and leave a like and comment if this story touches your heart.